Would you pray with me? Oh God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be pleasing in your sight, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Amen. So some of you guys know that my background, my undergrad degree is in music. Some of you know that I sing a little and play guitar a little and do some of that kind of thing. And I started doing a lot of that when I was probably about 12 years old. I go back to it, and probably my first time standing in front of a congregation of people in a church and singing a song had my brother either on the guitar or on the piano, and me standing right there by myself behind a pulpit singing a song. And I think about how many songs that I have presented in a church building over the years that have ensued. It's a lot. But as I thought about that, I remembered there's one song that I have sung in a church before, but I've only done it one time. I'm not going to sing it this morning, so I'm not going to about to bust into song, but I've only kind of had the guts to present that song in a church building one time, and even then it was a Wesley Foundation, a campus ministry on a college campus. And the reason that I was always reluctant to share the song was because I was afraid that just by the title, people would get tripped up and they wouldn't be able to make it past the title without having to go into a lot of explanation and all that kind of stuff. See what you think, where you would have landed if you came in and I said, I'm now going to sing a song called Jesus is for Losers. That's the name of the song. That might trip some of you up. Right? If you saw in the bulletin, oh, good, Pastor Brad's going to sing a song today called Jesus is for Losers. Or wouldn't it be weird if you came in and you said his sermon title today is Jesus is for Losers? Part of the reason I've never had the guts to do that song again is because I just had those fears that, well, I would just have to explain so much. And part of the danger is that if people just read the title of it, they would completely miss the meaning and miss the meat of what's in the lyric. Because the lyric of the song really does go on to explore the idea of what it means to really faithfully follow Christ. What it really means to be devoted in such a way that we might let go, lose some of ourselves that we tend to hang on to. Jesus is for losers. It presses into the idea that if we are being drawn toward faithfulness and Christ-likeness, that there are parts of ourselves that will probably need to be shed along the way. There are temptations, there are gut things that we have that we probably need to leave behind because they don't lead us in the path of Christ. Jesus is for losers. It sort of leads us to ask a question along the lines of what is ultimately important? What are we ultimately aiming for or aiming at? With our entire lives, with all of existence. It's sort of this, what's the meaning of life question. And so I ask that to you. What is the finish line for you? What is the race that you're running? And what do you expect to find at the finish line? What are you giving up along the way to get there? And when you get there, will it be fulfilling? Will it be ultimate? Will you be presented with questions along the way like, are you chasing after something that's causing you to sacrifice your soul in the process? What are you giving up along the way? If you capture the entire world but sacrifice your soul, have you really gained anything? It's sort of that line of thinking that Jesus brings us to in the scripture we're going to read. It's from the Gospel of Mark, the 8th chapter this morning. And I'm going to read a few verses in a minute, but I want to give you a little bit of context because where this happens, I think, is really pretty important to hearing it in its fullness. So this scene takes place, and the backdrop to it is a place called Caesarea Philippi. Now, the best kind of way that I can think to understand what Caesarea Philippi would have looked like, in Jesus' day and time, sort of like a spiritual version of Morrison's. What I mean by that is you would have walked up to Caesarea Philippi, and as part of the development, along a cliff, there would have been niches carved into the cliff. And within each niche, you would have found a different god or deity or supernatural power who you could worship and to whom you could present offerings. And you could sort of take your pick. I would like this parfait and this entree and this deity. There was even along that cliff face in Caesarea Philippi an opening to an underground river that in Jesus' day the people literally believed that that was a spiritual entrance to the underworld. So that is the place that this is taking place at, okay? And so what's happening there as Jesus and his disciples are approaching this place, he's pulling his disciples aside, and keep in mind, like, imagine you're looking at Jesus, and behind him you see the Morrisons. A la carte, take your pick. Deities are us. And Jesus asks the disciples the question, who do people say that I am? With that as the backdrop, who do people say that I am? And then he gets in their face a little further, and just before what we'll read this morning, he says, who do you say that I am? And then, in the midst of that encounter, Jesus goes on to start talking to the disciples about how he's going to have to suffer, how he is going to have to endure trial and tribulation. And then Peter steps into the fray. Peter, that disciple that so often speaks first and thinks later, who often is that guy that's having to draw his words back in after he says something and probably thinks, shouldn't have said that. The same Peter that when Jesus was going through his trial, swore up and down that he didn't know Jesus. That Peter. As Jesus is saying he's going to have to endure trial and tribulation and suffering, Peter sort of turns into Jesus' press secretary. And he pulls him aside and he says, you can't be saying stuff like this. We're trying to get a movement going. I mean, we're trying to generate some public appeal. We're trying to get good things happening, and we think God's on our side in this. And you can't just go spouting off about how, like, you're going to have to endure suffering and tribulation. People aren't going to buy into that. You need to watch it. He rebukes Jesus, and then Jesus looks at Peter and says those famous words, "Get behind me, Satan." Says, Peter, what you're saying is evil, because you're trying to keep me from being who I'm supposed to be, who I was sent here to be. You're saying that I'm not supposed to issue words of challenge and difficulty. Peter, that's evil. You're saying I'm not supposed to say things that might convict people, that I should only say things that make them feel good. Peter, that's evil. Get behind me. And then he called the crowd with his disciples, and he said to them, if any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake and for the sake of the gospel will save it. For what will it profit them to gain the whole world and forfeit their life? Indeed, what can they give in return for their life? Those who are ashamed of me and of my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, of them the Son of Man will also be ashamed when he comes in the glory of his Father with the holy angels. Whew. If you're going to be my disciple, Jesus says, you've got to follow me. Did anybody in the room this morning not ever play Follow the Leader? Has everyone pretty much played Follow the Leader at some point? I think most of us, it looks like all of us have. So y'all know the way that Follow the Leader typically works. And I could, if I wanted to, sort of walk us through that. I could come down amongst you and we could say, we're going to play a big game of Follow the Leader, and I could start doing things and you might start following along, right? So I could say, let's play Follow the Leader. And some of y'all might follow the leader. You might do that. But probably the way that you would expect the game to go is that eventually I would start doing things as the leader that would maybe be a little more challenging, a little more difficult, a little maybe goofy or embarrassing. And at some point, some of you guys might say, no, that's too much. this has just gotten silly, or this has just gotten hard, or you're doing things now that physically I can't do, or whatever. I feel like I'm making a fool of myself. I'm not going to play this anymore. And we bow out of follow the leader. That's part of the thing with the idea of following, is that we have a choice. We can choose to follow the leader, or we can choose not to. Jesus says, if you want to be my disciple, you will deny yourself, you'll pick up your cross, and you will follow me. But we all have a choice in that. Will we follow? Jesus makes it very clear that he is the leader. We don't get to make up our own leader. But if we're honest, the task of following him, just like in the game, gets more and more difficult, because if we listen close enough to what he says, he challenges us. He graduates us to places where, in order to follow, we are going to have to do things that are uncomfortable. We're going to have to make decisions and life patterns that don't just feel warm and fuzzy. It's not easy to follow this Jesus. And there may be times where we're tempted to say, you know what, I was willing to follow to a point, but that's asking a little too much. Don't ask me to go to Jamaica. That's crazy talk. Don't ask me to give up a week of vacation. Don't ask me to come on a Saturday and go to the Drake House and serve some people there. Don't ask me, Jesus, to give any of my money beyond what's comfortable. Don't ask me to step outside of tipping you. Don't ask me to sacrifice. That's too much. I'm not going to follow the leader anymore. It's uncomfortable. See, here's the thing, and I hope you hear, and I hope you know, that if your toes feel a little stepped on this morning, mine are black and blue. Because this hits me where I live too. I am one of you. And I kind of like embracing the warm and cozy words of Jesus. Let the little children come to me. My yoke is easy and my burden is light. I like those sorts of things. It's a different thing, though, when we approach the words of Jesus that challenge us in this way. And part of what I can't help but think is that if I'm going to follow him, I don't get to pick and choose which words I follow. I don't get to sort of split apart the Gospels and say, well, I'm going to follow the parts that make me feel good, but those parts that convict me, or those parts that lay me bare, or those parts that reveal my failing, I'm going to ignore those. Those parts that really challenge me, or challenge our church culture, or challenge Western Christianity, whatever it is, I'm not going to go there so much. But I don't know that we have that choice, do we? If you think about the game, Follow the Leader, if you had everyone playing and the first thing was to raise your left hand and everybody raised their left hand, the next thing was to raise their right hand and you had half the room go, well, I'm not going to do that one. And then the next thing was to clap and everybody clapped, and the next thing was to stomp and the other half of the room didn't stomp. Was everybody actually playing? You can't be in the game following the leader and only do half the stuff, can you? You're not, right? Am I right? Like, that's not fair, right? That's not the way you play it. And I know sometimes for me, it's like that's the way I want to play my faith. Well, I'm going to follow this part. Oh, but nope, I'm not going to do that part. I'm going to do this part. Ooh, but Jesus, that stepped on my toes. I'm not going to do that. Not going to take that seriously. But Jesus makes it plain. If you want to follow me, it involves taking up your cross. He says, I'm the leader. Follow me. And if you do, it's going to lead you to some uncomfortable places. It's going to lead you to some places of challenge, to some places of crisis. It's going to lead you to a cross. It's interesting to think about and for you to know that in the Gospels, the story of Jesus, this is the first place that the word cross comes up. So put yourself in Peter's shoes. See, we have this advantage of knowing kind of how the Jesus story plays out. We know that he eventually went to a cross, and we understand theologically that that cross was the sacrifice of Christ, and that the cross didn't hold him, and that death, even though he was placed in a tomb, he was resurrected, God raised him. So we know all that. Peter didn't. Can you imagine being one of the disciples? We don't have any indication that Jesus has been walking along peppering images of the cross. Hey guys, see me drawing in the sand? What's that shape? Oh, shape of a cross. You got it. Yep. Remember that. Hey boys, see that tree? What's it in the? Yep, shape of a cross. Be thinking about that. We don't have an indication that he was doing that. And Jesus in that moment, he says, if you want to follow me, if you really want to follow me, you need to be prepared to take up your cross. And to Peter and the disciples, they can't have interpreted that in the moment any other way. But Jesus asking them point blank, if you're going to really follow me, you need to ask yourself if you're willing to die for me. Because in that day and age, and for Peter and those disciples, the cross was synonymous with death sentence. The cross meant suffering. The cross was not comfortable. And yet Jesus says, if you're going to follow me, you've got to be all in and be willing to follow me even to the cross. Will you give up your life for me? Deny yourself. Pick up your cross. Follow me. The way we use language is kind of funny in our culture sometimes, isn't it? The way things have morphed. And I think about sometimes you hear the phrase, it's my cross to bear. And if we really get serious, think about some of the ways that people use that. Well, I've got this hair that when it's humid, it's just fly away and it's unmanageable. It's my cross to bear. I'm in this honors English class and it's really hard. It's my cross to bear. And it's like, the transmission just blew out in the car and I'm going to have to spend a lot of money to get it. It's my cross to bear. Really? A cross to bear? And I think we trivialize that expression. A cross to bear is something so much weightier than an inconvenience. A cross to bear is serious business, not a piece of jewelry. I wonder if as the church sometimes we've even almost made a mistake in the ways that we have depicted the cross, such that a cross to bear has become a piece of jewelry or something we put in our ears. Or if we're kind of hip and trendy, we have a tattoo of it. And if you do, you don't have to hide it. But I would maybe encourage you, if you're even wearing a cross this morning, does it go beyond just being a pretty piece of jewelry? When you put it on, maybe you think about, today, am I going to live sacrificially? Am I going to give myself away to the point that it hurts? Am I going to choose to do what Jesus instructed? Deny myself, pick up my cross, and follow. Did you notice the 3 steps he talks about there? He doesn't immediately go to, if you want to follow me, pick up your cross. What's the first thing he says? Deny yourself. And that really struck me because it made me think of the way so often we live our lives, and as we go through life, our arms are empty, and then we start experiencing life, and we graduate from high school, and we take that diploma with us, and we go off to college or something else, and we start collecting things, and then, we got a job offer, and so we kind of put that on board and we meet a nice girl or a nice boy and they become a part of our relationship, and then there's a job, and then there's a portfolio and savings, and then there's kids that come along, and then there's all the plastic things that we gather that go along, and then the kids are in sports and they're in scouts, and then we're worried because we got to go to counseling because our relationship, and we're holding all of this stuff as we go through our lives, and sometimes we just feel like we're trying to carry it all, right? And in the midst of that, Jesus says, if you want to follow me, deny yourself and pick up your cross. And sometimes the image he sees is us going, well, I would, but there's all this other stuff. I mean, if you would have caught me 25 years ago, that would have been better. Had a little extra space then, but now, it's all this stuff. And sometimes by our actions at that point, we say, Jesus, I don't have any extra space for you. And it's in that place where he says, if you want to follow me, the first thing to do is what? Deny yourself. So if you find yourself that's your life, and it's kind of like, there's all these competing things, maybe the first step you need to do is look at it critically and say, there is something that in order to pick up my cross, I've got to lay something down. I've got to deny myself. I've got to look critically at my life and say, am I going after the right things? Not right by the world's standards. Am I going after the right thing according to the creator of the universe? And if that means saying, I can't keep holding on to all this and be faithful, are we willing to sacrifice and create some space where then when we hear Jesus say, pick up your cross, we have some empty hands to go and pick it up? We have some time and space to say, you know what, it's not convenient to go to Jamaica, but I will. We have some time and money to spare to say, you know what, God, you're doing amazing work, and I want to give thanks with my life. And so, and don't hear this as some like manipulative thing, but like our watches and our wallets speak volumes, don't they? Our time and our money of what is important to us. Are you living sacrificially with those things? Following the leader? If you're bearing a cross, you're going to feel it. If you're carrying a cross, you're going to notice. If you're shouldering the cross, it might and is almost certain to hurt. But maybe we've sanitized that out of Jesus' message. Maybe we don't take that seriously. And maybe we don't push one another to really live in a way that's sacrificial. So I just want you to think about your life right now. Are you giving something up? Are you denying something? Are you living sacrificially for His sake somewhere in your life? To the point that it hurts. Not just to the point of what you can spare. Don't we kind of approach it that way sometimes? Well, I've got a little time to spare. I guess I'll do something at the church, or I'll do something at Habitat, or, I've got some money to spare this month. I guess I'll write a check to the church. That'll be good. Does that really seem like it equates with deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow me? It doesn't to me. He challenges me. He convicts me. And He pushes me to be better and more Christ-like than what my own flesh just wants to be. Deny yourself, pick up your cross, and follow me. And then we have a choice to make. Will we step in and say, yes, I will, or not? I'm going to invite the band to come back up. And as we kind of finish out this time, I'm really just inviting you to think about your own life, the patterns that you have, the ways that you treat your gifts, your time, your resources, And ask yourself the question, am I giving that away sacrificially? Am I giving some of my life in a way that it actually hurts a little bit, where it's not convenient? Am I shouldering the cross? There's a famous teacher and preacher, his name's Fred Craddock, and he had this image that I love. He said, like sometimes when we talk about giving our all to God, we think it's like us coming to the table with God on the other side, and we put a $1,000 bill on it, and we say, God, this is all I have, and we lay that $1,000 bill on the table and slide it to him and say, I give it all to you, just in one fell swoop. And then Craddock says what turns out to be the truth for most of us is that God pushes that bill back to us and says, you need to take this to the bank and exchange it for quarters. And you're going to walk through the rest of your life giving out your life in 25 cents here and 50 cents there. Not in one fell swoop, but in a pattern of following. Because I think that's part of what Jesus wants to impress on us. It's not just one time of saying, I will follow. It's like if he could really say it in fullness, it would be deny yourself, pick up your cross, and follow me, and follow me, and follow me, and keep following, and keep following. Because that's where it's going to be borne out. Not did you follow on the first time, did you keep following on the 64th time? Even when it's not convenient. So are you willing to bear a cross? If I was groping around for some ladder to fame, I am ashamed. If I was hoping respect would make a sturdy footstool, I am a fool. Bone weary every climb, blindsided every time. You know what song that's from? Jesus is for losers. The chorus goes like this. Just as I am needy and dry. Jesus is for losers. The self-made need not apply. Just as I am in a desert crawl. Lord, I'm so thirsty. Take me to the waterfall. Jesus is for. Are you willing to lose yourself and gain your soul? What's your cross? We're going to sing part of what Gary sang before I got up here. And I hope you hear the word cross maybe in a different way this morning.